The mop moved in slow arcs across the marble floor, pushing cold water toward the drain in the corner. It was 11:47 p.m. The lobby of Viridian Financial Technologies smelled like recycled air and cleaning solution, and the faint trace of someone's forgotten coffee left too long on its warming plate. David Carter had learned to work with the grain of the marble diagonal strokes, left to right, letting gravity pull the water rather than fighting it. Small economies of effort. He had learned them all in 14 months of night shifts. Outside, Manhattan was buried under 6 inches of fresh snow. The plate glass windows facing 7th Avenue turned the city into a soft blur of orange streetlight and white accumulation. Inside, the building was quiet, in the way that large buildings are never truly quiet. The hum of servers 2 floors down, the click of heating vents contracting, the distant chime of an elevator arriving somewhere above him. David paused and reached into the chest pocket of his uniform. He pulled out his phone and read the text. Lily, coughing a little, gave her the blue inhaler. "She's sleeping now. Don't worry." It was from Mrs. Okonkwo, his neighbor, who watched Lily on his night shifts for $40 and a homemade meal left in her fridge on Fridays. He typed back, "Thank you. I'll be home by 6. Give her water if she wakes." He put the phone away and picked up the mop again. At 52 feet by 30, the lobby was the largest continuous floor on his route. He did it last, after the executive bathrooms on the 32nd floor and the conference rooms on 31. The lobby took 22 minutes if he didn't rush. He never rushed. A security guard, named Patterson, broad-shouldered, young, never without earbuds, crossed the lobby without looking at him. This was normal. In 14 months, Patterson had spoken to David exactly twice. Once to ask if he'd seen anyone come through the side entrance. He hadn't. And once to tell him to keep his cart closer to the wall during fire drill hour. Both times, Patterson had looked slightly past him, the way people look past furniture. David finished the last arc near the revolving door and wrung the mop head into the bucket. The water came out gray. He stood for a moment, not resting exactly, but pausing. His lower back had been tight for 3 days. He would need to stretch before bed. He would not sleep enough before Lily woke at 7 wanting breakfast and her reading lesson. He pushed the cart toward the service elevator and pressed the button for basement level 2. The cart rattled in the metal box as it descended. David leaned against the wall and looked at the ceiling. There was a fluorescent tube near the back that flickered every 4 seconds. He had reported it twice. It had not been replaced. He was not a complainer by nature. He had learned, in the past 2 years, that there were categories of things worth fighting and categories of things not worth fighting, and that the chief skill of a quiet life was knowing which was which. Lily's cough was worth fighting. Her medication copay, her nebulizer, the pediatric allergist who had a 6-week waiting list and charged $400 for an initial consultation that insurance covered at 60%. These things David fought with the quiet ferocity of someone who has no other choice. The flickering light was not worth fighting. He returned the cart to the basement supply closet, rinsed the bucket, and hung the mop head to dry on the proper hook. His supervisor, a heavy-set man named Gerald, had a system for everything, and David followed it precisely. Precision was its own kind of dignity. Before he left, he walked the perimeter of the basement server room, not his assigned area, but adjacent to his route. He did this every night, not conspicuously, just passing. The glass observation panel on the side of the room gave a partial view of 3 racks of servers, their small indicator lights blinking in patterns. Tonight, one of the rack indicators was blinking amber, not red, not the flat green of normal operation. Amber. David looked at it for 4 seconds. Then he moved on. On the 31st floor, during his earlier pass, he had noticed something. A monitor left on in one of the secondary conference rooms, a junior analyst's workstation, unlocked, displaying a network diagnostic dashboard. He hadn't meant to look. He always looked. The dashboard showed packet loss rates climbing in irregular intervals. Not a steady degradation. Irregular. Clustered around specific timestamps. He'd stood in the doorway for perhaps 8 seconds. Then he'd moved his cart to the next office. Lily's drawing was taped above his locker, a crayon portrait of the two of them, rendered in the confident, anatomically inventive style of a 7-year-old. His hair was depicted as orange, which was not accurate. His smile was enormous, which was not accurate either, but which he found he could not look at without his chest doing something complicated. He changed out of his uniform, folded it precisely, and put on his street clothes. A gray wool coat, worn at the elbows. A blue scarf Lily had chosen at a thrift store because it was the color of her inhaler. He took the service exit into the cold. Sophia Blake had not slept in 31 hours. She was aware of this, the way she was aware of most things as a data point, cataloged and set aside. Sleep would happen when it was available. Currently, it was not available. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her office on the 34th floor, holding a coffee that had gone cold, and looked at the snow-covered city below. The lights of Midtown Manhattan spread out like a circuit board, organized, interconnected, redundant. She had always found it beautiful in a functional way. The city did not care whether you found it beautiful. It simply ran. Her assistant, a composed young man named Fletcher, appeared in the doorway. "The board is asking for an update in 40 minutes. Tell them I'll have one in 35. Fletcher made a note and disappeared. Sophia turned back to the window. Viridian's payment processing infrastructure had begun exhibiting anomalous behavior at 9:14 p.m. By 10:30, 3 separate transaction queues had failed. By 11, a cascade had begun that was now affecting 17% of active client accounts. The company processed $4.2 billion in transactions daily. 17% of that was, she did not need to calculate it. She had already calculated it. The current quarterly position was already under pressure. The Hartfield merger, the SEC inquiry that was not yet public, the European expansion that was hemorrhaging runway. Any one of these was manageable. Together, with this, they were not manageable. They were a sequence of accelerating failures. She walked back to her desk and pulled up the incident report. Marcus Webb, her chief technology officer, had been in the incident room since 9:30. He had called her at 10:15 to tell her the team was working the problem. She had asked for a root cause. He had said they were narrowing it down. She had asked for a timeline. He had said it was fluid. She had fired him at 10:58 in front of the assembled incident team. This was not cruelty. It was clarity. Marcus had failed to control his team's narrative in a crisis, which meant he had failed to control the crisis, which meant he could not be trusted with the next 48 hours. She needed someone who could answer questions directly. The problem was that firing Marcus had not solved the problem. The system was still failing. Her chief financial officer, Raymond Holt, had come to her at 11:20 to suggest that they begin preparing a client communication. She had looked at him for a long moment. "We don't communicate a crisis," she'd said. "We communicate a resolution. Come back when we have one." Raymond was not a bad man. He was a man shaped by a specific kind of institutional training, one that prioritized optics over outcomes. Sophia had known this when she hired him. She kept him because his optics instincts were useful 60% of the time, and because managing the board required someone who could speak their language fluently. But in moments like this, his instincts were exactly wrong. She needed someone who could look at the actual system and tell her what was actually happening. Her phone rang. The board's chairman. She answered on the second ring. Sophia. His voice was careful, measured. The voice of a man who had learned that measured tones in a crisis conveyed authority. "Patrick, we're hearing 17%. Is that current? As of 11 minutes ago, the team is working the containment. Who's leading the technical response now that Marcus is?" "I am," she said. This was technically true. In the way that a general leads a battle they cannot personally fight. "I'll have a full briefing ready for the board at 12:30. She ended the call. Then she sat down, put both palms flat on the desk, and did what she always did when a situation moved faster than her plans. She went back to fundamentals. Strip away the noise. Find the one true problem. Find the person who can solve it. She pulled up the personnel files for her remaining technical staff. At 11:52 p.m., an IT analyst named Derek Solis was standing in the secondary incident room on the 29th floor, staring at a terminal output he did not understand. The log was showing repeated write operations across the same memory address, not a standard crash pattern, not a clean intrusion signature. Something in between. He had been staring at it for 11 minutes and had changed his working theory 3 times. The door was open. The hallway was lit and empty. A cleaning cart appeared at the edge of the doorway, pushed by a man in a gray uniform. The man slowed, the cart half inside and half outside the room, and looked at the terminal from across the space. Derek didn't look up. "Excuse me," said the man in the uniform. "I need to do this room." 5 minutes. "Come back," Derek said. "A pause. That's not a breach," said the man in the uniform. "That's a delayed overwrite loop." Derek looked up. The man was looking at the terminal. He had dark circles under his eyes and a faint scar across his left jawline, and the particular stillness of someone accustomed to being underestimated. "What did you say?" Derek asked. "The pattern on your screen. The write operations clustered in those intervals, they're not random. Someone set them to fire on a delayed trigger. The data isn't being taken. It's being rewritten." Derek stared at him for a moment. Then he made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite dismissive, but something in that register, and turned back to his terminal. "Thanks," he said, in the tone that meant, "Please leave." The man with the cart looked at the screen for 2 more seconds. Then he pushed his cart into the hallway and continued down the corridor. Derek did not report this exchange for 43 minutes, not because he remembered it suddenly, but because he had run out of his own ideas. And in the exhausted space where his professional pride had been, the janitor's words floated up with the annoying persistence of things that are correct. He texted his supervisor at 12:35 a.m. This is going to sound weird. The cascade was not dramatic. This was perhaps the most frightening thing about it. There was no single catastrophic failure, no system-wide shutdown, no alarm klaxon. Instead, it was incremental, one queue failing, then another. Clients in the Pacific time zone logging in to find balances displaying incorrectly. A batch processing job for a mid-sized insurance client silently corrupting its output. A reconciliation report generating numbers that did not reconcile. By 1 a.m., 2 of Veridian's top-tier clients had called the emergency client line. By 1:15, a third had sent a notice of potential breach of contract to the legal team. In the incident room on 29, the assembled technical staff 6 analysts, 2 senior architects, 1 external consultant who had been pulled from a hotel room in Midtown, moved between terminals in a controlled panic that looked, from a distance, like productivity. Sophia entered the room at 1:18 a.m. She did not announce herself. She stood at the back of the room for 2 minutes and watched. Then she walked to the center console and looked at the current state display. "Who owns the write error cluster?" she asked. A young woman named Priya raised her hand without looking up from her terminal. "I have it. What's your theory?" "External intrusion, staged delivery." Someone got into the pipeline and set a timer. "What's the confidence level?" Priya paused. 60%. "What's the 40%? Silence. Sophia looked around the room. Someone was in this hallway earlier. Said something to Derek about a delayed overwrite loop. Who was it? Derek, pale and tired, raised his hand. "The night janitor." "I didn't. I thought he was guessing." "Bring him up," Sophia said. "He's gone for the night. His shift ended at, I don't care what time his shift ended. Find him." They reached David on his phone at 1:34 a.m. He was on the subway, halfway home, his breath fogging slightly in the cold metal air of the car. He listened to the voice of a woman he didn't recognize, Fletcher, Sophia Blake's assistant, and said, "I'll come back," and nothing else. He reversed at the next stop. At 2:11 a.m., David Carter walked into the 29th floor incident room still wearing his street clothes, the gray wool coat, the blue scarf. He had not changed back into his uniform. He had left his coat on a chair near the door and stood in the center of the room in a dark blue sweater and black pants that were, objectively, better clothes than anyone in the room had expected. The room had been briefed. The room was unconvinced. Sophia Blake stood at the head of the center console. She looked at him the way she looked at everything assessingly, without pretense of warmth. "You're the cleaning staff," she said. It was not a question. It was not an insult. It was simply the establishment of a known fact. "Night maintenance," David said. "Yes. You said something to one of my analysts about the system. About a delayed overwrite loop." "I did." "Say it again." "All of it." There was a quality of silence in the room, not the silence of respect, but of skepticism held at a controlled temperature. Everyone watching him was waiting for him to either embarrass himself or say something they had already considered and dismissed. David looked at the center display. His face was still. "You're not under attack," he said. "You're being erased." Slowly, the room did not move. "The pattern of write errors isn't consistent with an intrusion," he continued. "It's consistent with someone who already had write access and used it to schedule a sequence of overwrites across specific data tables. They didn't need to get in. They were already in." He paused. "The data isn't gone. It's been written over with plausible-looking garbage. But the timestamps on the overwrites are staggered, which means whoever did this wanted the damage to look like a cascade failure, not a coordinated action. They wanted you looking at your own system's integrity instead of looking at the access logs." The room was very quiet. Priya had turned fully in her chair to look at him. Sophia Blake had not moved, but something had shifted in her eyes, something that was not yet belief, but was no longer dismissal. "Show me," she said, at some point past 3 a.m. While the analysts were pulling the access logs David had directed them toward, Sophia took him into the smaller side room, a glass-walled meeting space off the main floor, and asked him the question she had been holding since he'd walked in. "Who are you?" David sat down across from her. He folded his hands on the table. "My name is David Carter." "That's not what I'm asking." A pause. Outside the glass, analysts moved between terminals. "I was a systems architect," he said. "I specialized in financial transaction infrastructure. Fault tolerance design, primarily. Making systems that didn't break when they were under pressure." He looked at the table for a moment. "Or, more accurately, making systems that broke in predictable ways, so you could plan for the failure modes." Sophia looked at him steadily. "Where?" "Here," he said. "Viridian. Before it was Viridian. When it was still Cascade Financial, and you were still building the infrastructure on top of the core platform." He met her eyes. "I designed the core platform." She did not react immediately. This was one of the things about Sophia Blake that the people who feared her misread as coldness. She processed before she responded. She was not cold. She was precise. Cascade's lead architect was a man named... She stopped. "D. Carter," she said, quietly. "Yes, you disappeared. 6 years ago, we assumed. My wife died," David said. "Breast cancer, stage 4. She was diagnosed 14 months before she died. I took leave to care for her, and then I took leave to care for our daughter, and then my leave ran out, and the project moved on and I was..." He made a small, composed gesture. "Redundant." He said the word without bitterness. This was not performance. He had spent a long time finding peace with the sequence of events. "You built the payment architecture," Sophia said, "from the ground up. The transaction pipeline, the fault logic, the write protection layers." He paused. "Including the layers that someone appears to have found a way around. How long have you been working here? As maintenance?" 14 months. Sophia looked at him. "You've been in this building, doing maintenance, for 14 months. And you knew I needed the work," he said. "My daughter has a respiratory condition. The insurance through the maintenance contract is better than anything I could afford independently." He said this plainly, without shame. "I recognized the building when I applied. I thought about it. I decided it didn't matter where the insurance came from." She was quiet for a moment. You've been walking past the server room every night. Yes. Why? He thought about how to answer this truthfully. Habit, he said finally. And because I built it. It's hard not to check on something you built. Sophia placed both hands on the table and looked at him with the particular directness that had made 17 people, at last count, actively request reassignment away from her team. I want to offer you a position, she said. I know. Chief Technology Officer. Immediate. With full? No, David said. She stopped. I'm not saying that to negotiate, he said. I'm saying it because I've been used once by a version of what you're offering, and I know how it works. The company needs something, and the company takes it. And when the crisis passes, the person becomes the solution to a different kind of problem. He paused. I'm here because a building I helped build is in trouble. I'll help fix it. But I'm not going to sit in a title while someone figures out what to do with me next. Sophia was quiet. His phone lit up on the table between them. The screen read, Lily. He picked it up immediately. Hey, Bug. His voice changed, not softened exactly, but reorganized around something different. Are you okay? No. I know it's late. Did you drink the water? A pause. The blue one's in the side pocket of the bag. No. The side pocket, yeah. Okay. Another pause. I know. I'll be home soon. I love you. Go back to sleep. He hung up. Sophia was watching him. He noticed her watching him and said nothing. How old is she? Sophia asked. Something had shifted in her voice, not much. A degree or two. 7. The inhaler. She has mild asthma. It's well managed. He said this with the efficiency of a man who has explained it many times. Sophia looked at him for a moment, not the assessing look, but something quieter. Then she said, What are your conditions? He looked up. For helping tonight. You said you'd help. What are the conditions? He considered. I work alone in the server room. No one second-guessing. No one interrupting to tell me how the system is supposed to work. I know how it works. I built it. He paused, and nobody takes credit for what I find. Not officially, not internally, not to the board. I fix it. You present it. Whatever you need to say to whoever you need to say it to, that's your business. But I'm not the story. Sophia nodded. And the insurance, he said, for Lily. Not a raise. I don't want to renegotiate my contract tonight. Just the confirmation that my maintenance contract continues and the insurance doesn't change. She looked at him. I'll put it in writing before you go downstairs, she said. David sat down at the terminal in the server room at 3:47 a.m. and did not look up for 2 hours and 11 minutes. The server room was cooler than the rest of the building, maintained at 68 degrees to protect the hardware. He had asked for a coffee. Fletcher had brought it at 4 a.m. and left it on the side table without a word, which was exactly what David had wanted. He moved through the system with the particular ease of someone navigating their own home in the dark. Not because he was guessing, because he had made the architectural decisions that determined where everything lived. He knew why the partition tables were structured as they were. He knew the logic behind the right protection schema. He knew where the seams were. The access logs, when he finally found the relevant section, told a clear story. Clearer, probably, than the person who had written the exploit had intended, because whoever it was had known the system well enough to work around its protections, but not well enough to understand that David had built a secondary audit trail into the transaction engine, a ghost log, running parallel to the main access record, writing to a separate partition. It had never been documented in the handoff. He had intended to document it. Life had intervened. The ghost log showed access from an internal administrative account. The account belonged to a user with senior-level access to the transaction pipeline. He cross-referenced the account ID against the personnel directory. Raymond Holt, Chief Financial Officer. David sat back in his chair. He understood immediately why. Not the motivation. He didn't know the man. Didn't know his history. Didn't know what combination of debt or desperation or opportunism had produced this specific decision. But the mechanics made sense. Someone with CFO-level access to the financial architecture. Someone who understood the company's exposure in the merger negotiations, someone who would benefit from a controlled crisis that could be attributed to external attack. Drive down the stock price at the right moment, short the position, contain the damage on the back end. It was, David thought, a genuinely clever exploit. It would have worked with a different system, with a system whose architect hadn't built a hidden log out of professional paranoia and a mild distrust of documentation processes. He spent the next 40 minutes reconstructing the overwritten data from the secondary partitions, restoring the transaction records table by table. It was painstaking work. Not technically complex, he had designed the recovery logic himself, years ago. And it held. At 5:52 a.m., the main system diagnostic display shifted from amber to green. He sat for a moment. Then he pulled up the evidence package, the ghost log entries, the access timestamps, the account records, and compiled it into a format that a non-technical audience could read. He thought of Sophia Blake and her precision and her directness, and her 31 hours without sleep, and he made the document clear and short and unambiguous. He printed it. He took the pages from the printer. He stood up, picked up the empty coffee cup, and walked out of the server room. Fletcher was in the hallway. "Is she still upstairs?" David asked. "Yes," Fletcher said. "She didn't leave." David nodded and handed Fletcher the empty cup. At 6:15 a.m., the board convened in the executive conference room on the 34th floor. There were 11 people around the table. Raymond Holt sat at the far end, composed and attentive, his hands folded, his expression calibrated to the appropriate level of worried, but controlled that the situation called for. He had been performing this expression for the last several hours. Sophia stood at the head of the table. David Carter stood to her left. He was still in the dark sweater, and the black pants, and the gray wool coat he'd put back on without thinking. He was aware that he looked out of place. He had decided, somewhere around hour 3 in the server room, that this was not his problem. "The system is restored," Sophia said. "Transaction integrity is confirmed across all active accounts. Client communication will go out at 7 a.m. I'll be on calls with our top-tier clients personally from 7:30. She paused. "Before we discuss next steps, I want David to walk you through what we found." She stepped back. David put the document on the table and spoke for 6 minutes. He did not use jargon where plain language would serve. He laid out the timeline, the access log evidence, the mechanism of the exploit, and the account to which it traced. He spoke the way he had learned to speak in a previous professional life, directly, without hedging, with the particular confidence of someone who knows the difference between what they know and what they don't know. At no point did he look at Raymond Holt, but at some point during the 3rd minute, Raymond Holt stopped looking at the document and started looking at his own hands. When David finished, there was a silence that lasted perhaps 5 seconds. Then Patrick Morrow, the board chairman, said, in a voice stripped of its careful modulation, "Raymond." Holt looked up. "Is there anything you'd like to say?" Morrow said. There was another silence. This one lasted longer. What happened after that, the conversation, the legal team being summoned, the quiet and devastating mechanics of institutional consequence, was not David's concern. He gathered his pages, nodded once to Sophia, and walked out. In the hallway, he stopped. He was very tired. His back hurt. It was 6:31 a.m., and Lily would be awake in less than an hour. And Mrs. Okonkwo had already done more than he'd asked of her. He took the elevator to the lobby. The lobby was different in early morning light. The snow had stopped overnight, and the first gray-pink light of a winter dawn was coming through the plate glass windows at an angle that made the marble floor luminous and strange. David stood at the edge of it for a moment, his coat over his arm, watching the light move. The lobby was empty, except for Patterson, at the security desk, a different Patterson than the night, or maybe the same one. He had never paid close enough attention, and the quiet hum of the building beginning its day. He was heading for the revolving door when he heard the elevator. Sophia Blake walked into the lobby at 6:44 a.m. She still had the same clothes on: the dark blazer, the gray slacks, the white shirt that was no longer quite crisp. She looked, for perhaps the first time in whatever compressed timeline they had shared, like a person who was tired. She walked toward him with the same directness she brought to everything, and stopped 3 feet away. "The system is stable," she said. "I know. I checked before I came down." A pause. "The board is asking how we want to handle the public narrative," she said. "For the recovery. There will be questions about who ran the technical response." "That's your story to tell," David said. "I meant what I said." She nodded. This did not surprise her. She had, in the last several hours, developed a reasonably accurate model of David Carter. "I'm going to offer you a consulting arrangement," she said. "Not a title. Not a salary. A quarterly retainer, part-time, with defined scope. Systems review, architecture audits." She paused, "and the insurance stays." That was already in writing, as of 4 a.m. David looked at her. "Why?" "Because the system you built is still running," she said. "Because the redundancy you designed, the ghost log, the secondary partition, is the only reason we have a company this morning instead of a press release and a class action filing." She met his eyes. "And because you knew what was happening before anyone in that building with a job title and a salary and access to every system we own." He was quiet. "I didn't see you," she said. And this was different from the other things she had said, less precise, more effortful, the way a person speaks when they are being honest about something they find uncomfortable. "For 14 months, I walked past you in this building. And I didn't see you. You saw what you wanted to see," David said. She accepted this. It was true. She did not have the habit of disputing true things. "Think about the arrangement," she said. "No rush." He nodded. She turned to go. Then she stopped. "The blue scarf," she said. "Your daughter chose it?" He looked down at the scarf, which he had looped around his neck at some point, without thinking. "Yes, she has good taste." And then Sophia Blake walked back to the elevator, pressed the button, and returned to the 34th floor to make the calls that would need to be made. 3 weeks later, David was finishing the lobby floor at 11:30 p.m., a Tuesday, quiet, snow again but lighter this time, a fine sifting that barely stuck to the pavement. He was on the last section near the revolving door when he heard footsteps and looked up. Sophia Blake was crossing the lobby in a dark coat and flat shoes, a bag over her shoulder, clearly leaving for the night. She saw him. She didn't look past him. She walked to the supply closet near the entrance. He had no idea how she knew it was there, and came back with a second mop. "You don't have to do that," David said. "I know," she said. She picked up the mop with the uncertain grip of someone who has not used one before, and looked at him for instruction. He showed her the angle. Diagonal strokes. Let gravity do the work. They finished the last section in silence, moving in parallel arcs across the luminous marble, the city white and still outside the windows. When they were done, Sophia leaned the mop against the wall and picked up her bag. 6 months, she said. "The consulting arrangement. Think about it." "I'll think about it," he said. She walked out through the revolving door into the snow. David stood for a moment in the empty lobby. Then he picked up both mops, put them on the cart, and began his rounds. The building was quiet. The servers 2 floors below were green across all indicators. Lily had left him a voicemail at 7 p.m., asking if he could bring home the cereal with the bees on the box, not the other kind. He took out his phone in the service elevator and wrote himself a note. "Bee cereal." Then he put the phone away, and the elevator descended, and the building held everything. It held the data, the light, the long memory of work done in the dark by people no one watched. The snow had started again just after 4. Ethan Cole noticed it the way he noticed most things, quietly, from the corner of his eye, without making a point of it. A few flakes at first, pale against the gray Chicago sky, then thicker, softer, settling on the hood of the delivery van like something that had been falling forever and had only just now decided to land. He pulled into the parking lot of Greenway Apartments on North Halsted, killed the engine, and sat for a moment. The van smelled like cardboard and cold. The heater had been broken since October, and he hadn't gotten around to filing the maintenance request. He kept meaning to. "Dad, we're here." Lily was in the passenger seat with her knees pulled up against the dashboard, her purple backpack squeezed between her feet. 7 years old, sharp-eyed, hair the same dark brown as his. She was looking at him the way she always did when she sensed he was drifting, not worried exactly, just watchful. She had been watchful since she was 3. "Yeah," he said. "We're here." He unclipped his seatbelt, stepped out into the cold. The snow crunched softly under his boots. He went around to the back of the van, pulled out the dolly and 3 stacked boxes, a furniture delivery, 2 side tables, and a lamp, and balanced them with the casual economy of someone who had done this 10,000 times. Lily hopped out and fell into step beside him without being asked. She knew the routine. It was a Tuesday. She had been kept home from Riverdale Elementary because of a low-grade fever that had vanished by noon, leaving her with that particular 7-year-old restlessness that made staying still feel like a punishment. Coming along on the last 2 deliveries had been her idea. He had said yes before she finished asking. "What floor?" she asked. 3. She scrunched her nose. "No elevator? Building this old?" "Probably not." He glanced at the entrance. "We'll check." There was an elevator, as it turned out a narrow, rattling box of a thing that smelled like mildew and old carpet. They took it anyway. Lily pressed the button for the 3rd floor and watched the numbers with the focus of someone performing a very important task. Ethan studied the hallway map bolted to the elevator wall. It was the kind of thing almost no one looked at. He looked at everything. 3rd floor. Long corridor, 6 units per side. Stairwell at the east end. Fire extinguisher cabinet near Unit 3. C. Emergency exit signage, pointing both directions. Drop ceiling tiles, probably asbestos in a building this age. Sprinkler heads every 12 feet. He clocked all of it in the time it took the elevator to shudder to a stop. Room 3F was a woman named Mrs. Patricia Harmon, who opened the door in a housecoat and slippers and spent 4 minutes telling him where to put the side tables before deciding the lamp should go in the bedroom, not the living room, which meant moving one of the tables and then second-guessing the bedroom placement. Ethan moved everything without complaint. Lily sat on the hallway floor, just outside the open door, and read the battered paperback she kept in her backpack, a dog-eared copy of The Phantom Toll Booth that she had already read twice. "Such a well-behaved little girl," Mrs. Harmon said, peering out at her. "She is," Ethan said. He meant it without sentimentality. Lily was the most quietly capable person he had ever known, and she was 7. He was aware this was not a neutral observation. He was her father. He loved her in a way that still occasionally surprised him with its weight. But he also believed it was simply true. He had raised her alone for 4 years. He had packed lunches and attended parent-teacher conferences and sat on the floor of the bathroom at 2 in the morning when she had the stomach flu. He had learned to braid hair from a video and practiced on a stuffed giraffe named Gerald until he got it right. He did not think of these things as extraordinary. He thought of them as the job. Outside, the snow was coming harder. They rode the elevator back down to the lobby. Ethan returned the dolly to the van, signed off on the delivery manifest on his phone, and checked the time. 4:47. One more stop, a package drop on Wicker Park, and then home. He had leftover chicken and rice in the refrigerator, and Lily had a reading log she was supposed to fill out before tomorrow. He was reaching for the driver's door when he heard it, a soft crump from somewhere above, like a book dropped on a hard floor. Then a second sound, lower, duller, not quite an explosion. More like the building clearing its throat. Then the smell. He stopped with his hand on the door handle. Lily was already in the passenger seat. She looked over at him. The smell was faint at first. Chemical-edged. Hot. His body understood it before his mind did. Something old and practiced woke in his chest. Then the fire alarm went off. It started as a single panel in the lobby, sealing a dim flickering where none of the light fixtures were, and then the alarm, that hollow industrial shrieking that cuts through walls and thought alike, and then the lobby door banged open, and a man in a gray undershirt stumbled out clutching a phone, shouting into it in a voice too ragged to make out the words. More people came. The stairwell door kept opening, families with children, an older man in a suit, a woman carrying a cat in a tote bag. They poured out into the parking lot, into the snow, and the alarm kept screaming, and somewhere above the third floor, the sky was beginning to change color, a faint orange tinge against the heavy gray clouds. Ethan was already out of the van. He had not made a decision exactly. His feet had moved, and his mind was catching up. He scanned the crowd. No one was directing anyone. People were pulling out their phones and pointing up and talking over each other. A woman in her 50s had started crying near the mailboxes. No fire department yet. He could hear sirens, far away. Getting closer. But not close enough. A voice cut through it all. "There's still someone on 3, I heard her." She was yelling. He traced the voice to a teenager. A kid, maybe 16, with a delivery bag still over his shoulder, pointing up at the building. Ethan turned and looked. Third floor windows. West side. Unit 3A or 3B. Smoke was pushing out from under the frame in thin, dark ribbons. And as he watched, the window of 3B went amber, not flames yet. Just the light behind it, going warm and wrong. He did the geometry without thinking. Exit points, time, oxygen, structural load. The building was old brick, good for heat resistance, bad for the ceiling and internal partition walls, which were probably original construction and would burn fast once they caught. The stairwell was still viable if the fire was contained to the west side. The east emergency exit would give him more time. He turned to Lily. She was standing 3 feet away, watching him. Not afraid she knew her father, but quiet in that particular way. That meant she understood something was happening. He crouched down in front of her, took both her hands. "I need you to stay right here," he said. "Right in this spot. You see that man over there, with the blue jacket? If anything changes, you go stand next to him. You don't move from this parking lot. Understand?" She looked at him for a moment. Her jaw was tight. "Okay," she said. "I'll be right back." He stood up and ran for the building. The morning had started the way most of her mornings started, too early, too full. Not enough coffee. Claire Bennett had been a principal architect at Harrow and Sloan Design Group for 3 years, and she had the schedule to prove it. Clients in San Francisco, deadlines in 2 time zones, a team of 6 who all needed different things from her at different times. She had chosen this, she reminded herself frequently. She had built this. She was taking a personal day, her first in 4 months, to deal with the mountain of domestic logistics she had been pushing down the road since September. New blinds for the bedroom, a shelf that needed rehanging in the hallway, a grocery list that had stopped being metaphorical and started being an emergency. She had just come back up from the basement laundry room when the alarm went off. She didn't panic immediately. Alarms went off. Usually it was a malfunction, a bad sensor, a neighbor burning toast. She set her laundry basket down and reached for her coat and her phone and her keys on the counter. And that was when she noticed the smell. Not toast. She was at the front door when the lights went out. The building's power flickered once and died, leaving only the emergency lighting, those pale red strips near the floor, barely enough to see by. She pulled the door open, and the hallway hit her like a wall. Not smoke yet. Not thick, but warm, noticeably warm, and the alarm was deafening. And the light from Unit 3B across the hall was doing something it shouldn't be doing, a trembling orange that she understood, on some animal level, was wrong. She turned toward the stairwell. The bookcase fell. She had moved it 3 weeks ago, a heavy freestanding unit, teak, belonged to the previous tenant, and weighed more than it looked, and she had meant to bolt it to the wall, but hadn't gotten around to it. The floor vibrated with whatever was happening in the adjacent unit, and the bookcase swayed. and she watched it happen with a strange slowness, and then it came down across the doorway, and the edge of it caught her left leg just above the ankle. The pain was immediate and white and specific. She hit the floor. The bookcase was across her lower leg. Not crushing, the corner had glanced off her rather than landed full weight, but when she tried to stand, the ankle buckled and the pain spiked up her shin in a way that made spots swim at the edge of her vision. Sprained at minimum, possibly worse. She pulled herself to sitting. The smoke was thicker now, rolling in from under the door of 3B, gray-white and acrid. She could feel it in the back of her throat. She pulled her sweater up over her nose and tried to move the bookcase. Too heavy. She got it 6 inches before her arms gave out. She was on the floor of the hallway, trapped, with smoke coming in from both sides now, and the alarm screaming, and the lights failing. She shouted once, twice. Her voice disappeared into the noise. She pressed her back against the wall, tried to think. The smoke was getting into her lungs now. A deep chemical scrape with every breath. Her eyes were streaming. She could see the emergency exit sign at the far end of the hall, red in the darkness. And it might as well have been a mile away. That was when the stairwell door burst open. He came through low, one shoulder against the doorframe, already moving with the kind of practiced efficiency that had nothing to do with luck. He was not what she expected. In the half-second before she closed her eyes against another wave of smoke. Not big, not in any obvious way. Medium height, lean, wearing a plain gray work jacket and boots. No gear, no equipment. He had a wet cloth pressed to his face. She registered it as his jacket sleeve, soaked with water from somewhere, and he moved through the smoke-filled corridor with his head down and his eyes tracking. He found her in 6 seconds. She knew because she counted. He crouched in front of her, and she saw his eyes, dark, quick, evaluating, move over her and the bookcase and the hallway and the door of 3B with the same expression a carpenter might use assessing a beam. Not calm exactly, just without the particular kind of fear that wastes time. "I can't move," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. The words tasted like smoke. He didn't reassure her. He looked at the bookcase. "Pinned or broken?" he said. I don't know. The ankle. The shelf hit it." He put his hands on the bookcase, shifted his weight, found the leverage point, and lifted the edge off her leg in one controlled movement that required genuine strength but didn't show off about it. Then he checked her leg, a brief, careful examination, fingers pressing along the ankle. "You can flex it?" She did. Pain, but it moved. He nodded. "Okay." He was already looking at the rest of the hallway. The smoke was thickening fast. The door of 3B was visibly warm now. She could see the wood darkening from the heat, and there was a sound coming from inside it. A low, structural groan that she could feel through the floor. "Main stairs are blocked," he said, more to himself than to her. "East exit." "How do you know the main stairs?" "I came up them." He was already standing, sliding one arm under hers, helping her to her feet. The ankle held with his support, but wouldn't take full weight. "Wrap your arm here." She did. "Keep your head low." They moved. He had wrapped the wet cloth around her mouth and nose. She only realized afterward he'd done it one-handed while supporting her weight. He kept himself slightly in front, body angled to take the worst of the smoke, eyes forward. The hallway felt half the width it had been. The heat was building from the west side like a wall. She tried to match his pace. Her ankle sent fire up her leg with every step. He didn't slow down, but he adjusted to her subtly, almost imperceptibly, keeping her upright, without making her feel carried, without making her feel helpless. "Look at me," he said, when her head drooped from the smoke. She looked at him. "Stay awake." The east corridor was better, less smoke. Cooler, but better is not the same as safe. The ceiling above Unit 3D was making a sound she had never heard before, and hoped never to hear again. A deep, rhythmic creaking that meant the structural supports above it were working too hard. The overhead fluorescent fixture, still connected to the emergency backup, flickered in time with the sound. Ethan calculated time, temperature, distance. He had done this before, a long time ago. In buildings that looked nothing like this one, and buildings that looked exactly like this. his body still new. It ran the numbers without being asked. The emergency exit was at the end of the corridor, through the 3E utility alcove, then a hard left down a fire stair he had marked on the map in the elevator. 20 seconds at a brisk walk, longer with an injured person. He checked the door of 3D, as they passed, pressed the back of his hand against the wood, held it for 1 second, pulled away. Hot, but not critical. The fire was lateral, not yet climbing through the structure. The sprinklers had failed, the alarm had triggered them, but the pipe pressure was low, probably because someone had cut the system for maintenance and not restored it. He had noticed the dry floor when he came up, a detail most people would file as good news without asking why. Claire was still upright. Doing better than most would. She had stopped asking questions and started using her energy to move. Which meant she was thinking. "Who are you?" she said. They were 12 feet from the alcove. "Ethan, do you live here?" "No." She almost laughed, on reflex, a small exhale through the wet cloth. "Okay." They reached the alcove. He checked the exit door, cool, clear, and pushed it open with one shoulder. The fire stair opened up in front of them, gray concrete, industrial railing, exactly where the map had said it would be. Cold air rushed in from below. Clean cold, smoke-free. She exhaled. He didn't slow down. They were 3 steps down when the ceiling in the hallway behind them gave way. Not the whole ceiling, a section of it. Maybe 8 feet of plaster and underlying structure, coming down with a crash that shook the walls and sent a wave of thick gray smoke billowing into the stairwell. The door banged on its hinges from the pressure change. Claire flinched hard against him. He tightened his arm around her and kept moving. "Don't stop," he said. She didn't. The man in the blue jacket was named Dennis, and he worked in insurance, and he had no idea why the small girl had positioned herself 3 feet to his left and was staring up at the building with an expression that made him profoundly uncomfortable. She hadn't said anything to him. She had simply appeared beside him, planted her feet, and fixed her eyes on the 3rd floor with the focused stillness of someone who had been told to wait and intended to wait correctly. The fire department arrived 2 trucks, then a 3rd, and the paramedics came, and people were being directed back, and there was the organized noise of emergency responders doing what they were trained to do. A firefighter in full gear was talking to a woman near the entrance. Hoses were being unrolled across the snow. Lily watched the east side of the building. She had been watching for 3 minutes when the door opened. A man and a woman came through it. The man had his arm around the woman, and she was leaning into him, and they were both moving slowly, unsteadily, with the careful deliberateness of people who had just done something difficult. The woman was coughing. The man was not. Lily watched as a paramedic reached them, immediately moving fast, bringing an oxygen mask, helping the woman to a gurney. Voices, hands, efficient motion. The man stood apart from it, hands at his sides. He was breathing hard. She could see that from here. But he was standing up straight, and he was looking back at the building, checking, cataloging, doing something in his head. Then he turned and saw her. She crossed the parking lot at a dead run. She hit him full force in the midsection, both arms around him, face pressed into his jacket, which smelled like smoke and cold and him. He put both arms around her. His hands were shaking a fine, almost invisible tremor. She could feel it. He pressed his face into the top of her head. Neither of them said anything for a long time. The paramedics wanted to check him out. He let them take his blood pressure and examine his hands, which had a minor burn across the right palm from where he had braced against the wall. He told them it was nothing, and they gave him a bandage and some burn gel, and told him to follow up with a doctor. He told them he would. He sat on the back bumper of the ambulance with Lily beside him, her head leaning against his arm, watching the firefighters work. The east and west wings of the 3rd floor were fully compromised now, but the building was not. They would save it. He could tell by the angle they were running the water. A Chicago Fire Department captain came over after a while, a heavy man with a red face and ice-gray mustache named Ridgway. "That was you?" he said. "Bystander," Ethan said. Ridgway looked at him, looked at the building, looked back. "You came up the east stair?" "Yes." "Checked the fire door on 3D. A pause. "I was checking the exit." "Right." Ridgway scratched the back of his neck. "You know we had a crew suiting up when you brought her out." "I know. You should have waited." Ethan said nothing. "You also shouldn't have known to check the sprinkler feed line. But our crew says the valve was closed manually, and that was before the fire started. So," Ridgway looked at him again. "You got a name?" "Ethan Cole." "Mr. Cole. You a first responder?" "A beat." "Not anymore." The woman he had brought out was named Claire Bennett. He found this out from a paramedic who was looking for next-of-kin contact information and assumed Ethan would have it. He corrected the misunderstanding, gave them her apartment number, and went to sit with Lily in the van with the heat running. It was working again. He had fixed it last week, he just hadn't gotten around to filing the update. They sat in the parking lot while the trucks worked. "Is she okay?" Lily asked. "She will be. Her leg was hurt. Sprained. Maybe a small fracture. They'll tell her at the hospital." Lily considered this. Outside, a television crew had appeared from somewhere local news. Probably a woman in a coat talking into a camera with the fire trucks framed behind her. "The people on TV want to talk to you," Lily said. "I know. Are you going to?" "No." She seemed unsurprised by this. She went back to her book, angled toward the window for the light. Ethan sat with his hands in his lap. His right palm throbbed under the bandage. The adrenaline was leaving him now. Gradually, the way it always had, not suddenly dropping but slow, like water draining from a tub, leaving everything quiet and slightly heavier. He was 41 years old. He had not been in a burning building in 4 years. He had thought the thing inside him, the thing that had moved his feet before his mind could stop them, had gone quieter than this. He had been wrong. He was 29 when he joined the Chicago Fire Department, and 32 when he transferred to the Urban Search and Rescue Task Force, one of 6 federally designated USAR teams in the state. He spent 4 years doing the work that most firefighters never see. Collapsed structures, industrial disasters, 3 deployments to other states when floods and earthquakes asked for more bodies than local departments could spare. He was good at it. He was, by multiple accounts, exceptional at it. He had a gift for structural geometry, for reading a damaged building, the way some people read a face, catching the small signs of what it was about to do. His captain at Task Force 3 had called it an instinct, which Ethan had always found imprecise. It wasn't instinct. It was observation. He paid attention to the things other people walked past. He met Sarah at a bar in Logan Square on a Wednesday in February. And they were engaged within the year. And Lily was born the year after that. He had been the happiest he had ever been in his life, which he recognized even at the time, with the awareness that happiness of that specific kind is never fully safe. The call came on a March afternoon, a warehouse fire on the south side, a building that should have been condemned 2 years earlier, a structure so compromised that the first arriving engine company should have recognized it on approach. They did not. Sarah was a paramedic, on duty, staging outside for a transfer. The roof of the northeast section came down without warning. She was 43 feet from the building's east wall. The investigation found 7 separate code violations. The building's owner was eventually fined. Ethan did not follow the case closely after a certain point. He left the task force 8 months after the funeral. Lily was 3. She needed a parent who came home. He did not make a dramatic announcement. He filed the paperwork, cleared out his locker, drove home. He got his commercial driver's license the following month and took a job with a logistics company because it was steady and the hours were predictable and nobody was in danger. He moved to a 2-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Square. He learned to braid hair from a video, practiced on a stuffed giraffe named Gerald, got it right eventually. He told Lily almost nothing about his work before. She was too young, and then she was not too old, but he was out of the habit of telling anyone anything. And it seemed like a door that didn't need to be opened. Captain Ridgway knew, as it turned out. He had checked. He came back to the van while Ethan was sitting in the driver's seat. Knocked on the window. Ethan rolled it down. "Task Force 3, Ridgway said. It was not a question. "Yeah." The captain nodded slowly, hands in his coat pockets. "Your wife was the paramedic on Renner Street." Ethan looked straight ahead through the windshield at the fire trucks. "Yeah," he said again. Ridgway was quiet for a moment. Then, "For what it's worth, Cole, that woman is alive because of you. The crew found the fire in the utility corridor less than a minute after you got her out. She couldn't have made it alone." Ethan didn't respond. Ridgway tapped the door frame twice and walked away. 10 days later, a Thursday, just after 5 in the evening, Ethan was in the kitchen. He had a pot of soup on the stove, nothing elaborate, chicken and vegetables and egg noodles, the kind of thing that made the apartment smell like something worth coming home to. Lily was at the kitchen table doing homework, or supposed to be doing homework, actually conducting a detailed interrogation of a ladybug she had found on the windowsill and transported to a paper cup. "Ladybugs don't hibernate," she informed him. "I know. They cluster, though. In winter. Like thousands of them together." "I know. Did you know that?" "I did." She considered this. "How?" "I used to read the same kind of books you read." She seemed pleased by this, filed it away for future reference. The ladybug made a bid for freedom, and she gently redirected it with one finger. The knock at the door was quiet. He almost didn't hear it over the stove. He opened it. Claire Bennett was standing in the hallway in a dark coat, her hair down, one hand resting on a wooden cane. Her ankle was in a brace, a moderate lateral sprain with a small avulsion fracture. He would learn later. Not serious, but requiring 6 to 8 weeks. She looked better than she had in the corridor on the 3rd floor of Greenway Apartments, which was a low bar. But she also looked better than he might have expected. Composed, clear-eyed, carrying herself with a straightness that suggested the cane was a concession to practicality rather than limitation. She had found his address through the fire department report, which he had apparently appeared in under his full legal name, because Captain Ridgway had been thorough. She looked at him for a moment. "You disappeared," she said. "I went home." Before anyone could, she paused. Before anyone could say anything. There wasn't anything to say. She looked past him into the apartment. He was aware, briefly, of how it must look to her small, organized, nothing decorative, except Lily's drawings, stuck to the refrigerator with magnets. 3 of them recently: a sun, a house, a figure labeled Dad with oversized hands. "Can I come in?" Claire asked. He stepped back. Lily looked up from her homework immediately, registered the cane, the stranger, her father's face, and executed the social calculation that 7-year-olds perform faster than adults' credit. "Hi," she said pleasantly. "Hi," said Claire. "I'm Lily." "I'm Claire. Does your leg hurt?" "A little." Claire looked at the brace, then at Lily. "It's getting better. Dad sprains his ankle sometimes when he goes running. He doesn't make a big deal of it." Ethan went to the stove and turned down the soup. They sat at the kitchen table. He had moved Lily's homework to one end. Claire had removed her coat, and he brought 2 mugs of coffee and a glass of orange juice for Lily, who had reinstated the ladybug interrogation, but was very clearly listening to everything. Claire held her mug without drinking from it. Looking at him, "You saved my life," she said. "I've been trying to figure out how to say more than that. And I can't. That's the thing. It just keeps being that." "You were breathing," he said. "Someone should have gone in. Nobody did. The fire crew was 60 seconds behind me. You don't know if that would have been fast enough." He knew it would not have been. He said nothing. "I did some asking around," Claire said carefully. "After the report. Task Force 3. USAR certification." She glanced at Lily, who was now making a careful observation of her ladybug with a magnifying glass she had produced from somewhere. "You were in the field for 6 years. 4.5. Why did you leave?" He looked at his coffee. "Lily," he said, after a moment. Claire seemed to understand, from his tone, not to push. She glanced again at the refrigerator at the drawing labeled Dad with the big hands. "The things you knew," she said. "In that building. The sprinkler line. The ceiling structure. Which door to check. Training. You haven't been trained in 4 years. That kind of training doesn't go anywhere." He paused. "It's not something you forget. It's more like a way of seeing." She was quiet for a moment. "Does it bother you?" she asked. "Having that carrying it, and doing what you do now. He looked up at her. It was a more precise question than he had expected. Most people, when they found out, went one of two directions. Either they told him it was a waste, that he should go back, that someone with his skills shouldn't be driving a van, or they got uncomfortable and changed the subject. Claire had done neither. She had asked the actual question. "Sometimes," he said. Lily looked up from her ladybug. "Dad's good at lots of things," she said, matter-of-factly. "He knows all the fire exits everywhere. And he can fix pretty much anything. And he does this thing when he walks into a room where he looks at all the corners first." Claire looked at him. "She's very observant," he said. "She is." From across the table, Lily gave them both a look of profound satisfaction and returned to her ladybug. 2 weeks after that first visit, Claire came back. She had taken to stopping by, not frequently, not intrusively, but with a regularity that Ethan noticed without examining too carefully. She brought a book for Lily the second time, a field guide to insects, which elevated her to a near mythological status in Lily's estimation. The ladybug had been released back to the world, but not forgotten. The ankle was healing. She used the cane less. She was back working partial days from home, fielding calls on her laptop at the kitchen counter, while Ethan made dinner. He did not examine too carefully how quickly that had become a comfortable arrangement, either. On a Saturday afternoon in late January, with snow coming down in earnest outside and Lily at a friend's birthday party 3 blocks away, Claire sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open and said, without looking up, "I want to talk to you about something." "Okay," he said. He was doing the dishes. "One of our project clients runs a safety consulting firm, commercial buildings, structural assessments, emergency protocol design. They've been looking for someone to lead their training division, specifically someone with USAR background." She paused. "I told them about you." He turned off the faucet. "Without asking me, without asking you." "Yes." She looked up now. "I'm aware, that was presumptuous." He dried his hands on a dish towel and sat down across from her. "Why?" "Because I've watched you look at every building you enter. I watched you count the ceiling sprinklers in the pizza place last week. I watched you tell Lily where to stand in the parking lot before you ran into a burning building." She paused. "You're doing it anyway, Ethan. Every day, constantly. You haven't stopped. You just stopped getting paid for it." He looked at the table. "The hours are regular," she added. "No field deployment. Training and assessment. Monday through Friday. I'd have to take a licensing exam. My certification's lapsed." She blinked. "Is that a yes?" "It's a precondition." She looked at him for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression, relief, maybe, or something that wanted to be relief and hadn't quite gotten there yet. "I thought you were going to tell me it wasn't possible," she said. "Most things that look impossible are just inconvenient." He stood up and went back to the dishes. After a moment, "Thank you for looking into it." She turned back to her laptop. "You're welcome," she said, in a voice that suggested she was working very hard to stay casual about it. He picked her up from the party at 6. She came down the front walk of the Weaver house, still wearing a paper crown from the birthday game, cheeks pink from the cold, carrying a goodie bag in one hand, and Gerald the giraffe who had come out of retirement for the occasion in the other. She climbed into the van and immediately reported, in considerable detail, the events of the party, the cake flavor, chocolate. Unfortunately, she preferred vanilla. The game that had been played. She had come in second, which was correct because the winner was the birthday girl, and it would have been rude to beat her. And the girl named Mackenzie, who had been crying about something in the bathroom for a while. Ethan listened to all of this. He did not drive through the part about Mackenzie. What was she crying about? "I don't know exactly. Her parents are getting divorced, I think. Emily told me." Lily looked out the window. "I told her, my mom died when I was 3, and that it was still sad, but you got used to sad things eventually." "Is that true?" He thought about it. "You don't get used to them," he said. "You get better at carrying them." Lily considered this with the same focused seriousness she brought to most things. "Did it help?" he asked. "What you said to her?" "I think so." She stopped crying. He drove. After a while, Lily said, "Is Claire staying for dinner?" "She already went home." "Oh." A pause. "She comes over a lot." "She does. I like it when she does." He said nothing. "Dad." Lily turned to look at him. She had the paper crown still on, slightly tilted. "You don't have to be alone. You know that, right?" He kept his eyes on the road. She had said it the way a 7-year-old says things directly, without understanding entirely what she was saying, and therefore with a precision that no adult could have managed. No setup, no careful framing. Just the thing itself. He felt it land somewhere specific. "I know," he said. She turned back to the window, apparently satisfied. "Can we have soup tonight?" "Already on the stove." "I knew it." She adjusted her crown. "You always have it on the stove." March came in cold and left warm. On a Tuesday, early enough that the neighborhood was still quiet and the light was the particular pale gold of just after sunrise, Ethan stood on the front steps of the apartment building with a coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. He was reviewing the training schedule for his 3rd week at Meridian Safety Partners, which was what the consulting firm was called, and which had a parking lot that he had already assessed for emergency vehicle access and found moderately satisfactory. The licensing exam had taken 6 weeks to prepare for. He had passed on the first attempt. His supervisor, a former structural engineer named Frank Hollis, who communicated primarily in monosyllables and appeared to regard Ethan's skill set with a mixture of professional respect and personal wariness, had told him, at the end of the 2nd week, that the training protocols he had redesigned were the best the division had seen. Ethan had said thank you and gone back to work. He heard the door behind him open. Claire came out in a coat and scarf, carrying her own coffee, hair still slightly damp from the shower. She had stayed because the snow had come in hard overnight, and the roads had been bad, and there was a guest room, and it had made practical sense. She stood beside him on the steps. They looked at the street. Someone's dog was investigating a patch of thawed grass. A kid on a bicycle tested the sidewalk cautiously. "Lily's still asleep," Claire said. "She will be until 7:15. Then she'll be up and asking about breakfast with no warning at all." "I know." Claire wrapped her hands around her mug. "She told me yesterday that she thinks Gerald the giraffe would like me, which I believe is high praise." "It is," he considered. "Gerald has high standards." She laughed quiet, genuine, and he felt it in his chest the way he had been letting himself feel things again, carefully, with the deliberate attention of someone learning a practice they had let go dormant. He had lost Sarah 4 years ago. He had been carrying that loss every day, in the way he had told Lily, not getting used to it but getting better at the carrying. Some mornings, it was still the first thing. Some mornings lately, it wasn't. He thought she would have liked Claire. He thought she would have found the whole situation, the fire, the parking lot, the fish out of water quietly funny in the way that Sarah had found most things quietly funny. She had been better at laughing than he was. He had always meant to tell her that more often. "You're going somewhere in your head," Claire said. "I do that." "I know." She looked at him. "You come back, though. That's the thing I've noticed. You always come back." He looked at her. He did not have the words, exactly, for the thing he wanted to say. He was aware that words were not always the primary vehicle, that a lot of what mattered happened in the smaller actions, the daily ones, the soup on the stove and the homework at the table and the standing beside. He had been doing those things, and she had been doing those things, and Lily had been doing her part, which primarily consisted of being herself, and occasionally making pronouncements that hit with the precision of a guided instrument. "You don't have to be alone." "No," he said. "I come back." They stood on the steps as the morning brightened around them, the snow still lying white and unmarked on the grass. The city still waking up. Everything ahead of them still becoming what it was going to be. Inside, at 7:15 exactly, they heard Lily's feet hit the floor.